My name is Jennifer Gabriel, and I use the she, her pronouns. I am the Executive Director at the National Women's Hall of Fame. I'm honored to welcome you to tonight's program, the Unsung Women Genius Summit. We have asked all of our guests to provide a visual description of themselves to aid any of our visually impaired audience members. So to start things off, I am a white woman with shoulder-length brown hair. I'm in my mid-40s and I wear glasses, and I'm sitting at home in my home office, which has yellow walls, and there are pictures of sunflowers behind me. Before we begin tonight's program, I would like to acknowledge the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, whose lands are home to the National Women's Hall of Fame. We recognize the Haudenosaunee's 5 Native nations, historic Indigenous communities in New York, individuals and communities who live here now, and those who are forcibly removed from their homelands. In offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty, history, and experiences. Since this program is virtual and we have folks joining us from all over the world, I want to share with you a video that showcases the National Women's Hall of Fame and our beautiful home at the historic Seneca Knitting Mill in Seneca Falls, New York. Thank you for joining us this evening for what I know will be an incredibly inspirational event. We hope to see you again in the future. Welcome to the 1844 Seneca Knitting Mill, home of the National Women's Hall of Fame. We are the first and oldest nonprofit organization dedicated to celebrating the achievements of great American women. We currently have 293 inductees whose stories inspire us and must be told so that all people of all genders across the nation understand their contributions to our society and our nation. In September of 2022, we will induct another class of 9 incredible women whose contributions and stories will stand the test of time. And we are launching programming that seeks to inspire people across our nation and around our world. Our home is in the historic 1844 Seneca Knitting Mill, which has stood as a beacon of hope and inspiration to generations of people. There's something magical about standing in our building and looking out to the banks of the Cayuga-Seneca Canal and really understanding on a deep level how important that waterway is to our entire nation. The canal was a driver for so many important conversations, and Seneca Falls was a major hub for the flow of information and for the exchange of ideas that allowed for important movements to begin, from abolitionism to the women's rights movement. Our mission and the work we do is further enhanced because of our ability to call this historic building home. The Seneca Knitting Mill is one of the few surviving mills in this area, and its history is deeply intertwined with the mission of the National Women's Hall of Fame. For 155 years, the Seneca Knitting Mill produced woolen goods. Owners and management did not want to support slavery, and they made the decision to not use cotton for any of their products, and instead sourced wool from local sheep farmers. This was also one of the only businesses that employed women and immigrants, so it was a place for advancement, empowerment, and achievement. In fact, 2 of this building's original trustees attended the first Women's Rights Convention. We consider it a privilege to steward such a historic treasure. In the months and years to come, and with the generosity of donors, we will continue our work to renovate this building, expanding our exhibits and gathering spaces into the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors. Our museum and gallery space will be a pilgrimage site for people across the world to visit and feel energy, excitement, and inspiration from the stories we tell about the incredible achievements of our inductees. Storytelling is how history comes alive. I think about the little girl in Wyoming, the little boy in Maine, the professional who wants to change careers at 55, the new father who is raising triplet girls, the teen who is struggling to tell their parents they are transgender, the grandmother who wants to leave this world a better place for her family. The National Women's Hall of Fame has a place in inspiring all of these people and inspiring you. This is a great time to get involved. Join us.
A warm welcome. My name is Tatum Marquis. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Visitor and Community Relations Manager here at the Hall. I'll be your MC this evening. I'm a white woman in my mid-20s. I'm wearing a black button-up, have blonde hair, and have a gray background. As we position ourselves to host Induction Weekend in September 2022, we are creating programming like Unsung Women Genius Summit that focuses on the themes that tie the work to the priorities of our 2021 inductees. We call this Inspiring Voices series. Through a series of panels, workshops, events, and curated social media campaigns, we are exploring a wide range of topics relevant to our work to highlight the accomplishments of great American women. Throughout Black History Month, we share the stories of unsung women geniuses, Black women whose genius you might not know about, but whose legacies affect us every day. We're now wrapping up February and kicking off Women's History Month with the Unsung Women Genius Summit. Over the next 2 hours, we will hear from the 5 incredible women who will provide us with educational resources, inspirational stories, and demonstrate just how important it is to teach the next generation about women who are often overlooked. Our summit will spotlight the formerly unsung woman genius and 2021 inductee, Katherine Johnson, NASA mathematician, pioneer in racial and gender equality, and contributor to one of the first triumphs in human spaceflight. Cathy Johnson is remembered as one of America's most inspirational figures. The program will begin with a conversation with 2 of Katherine Johnson's daughters, Joylette Heilig and Katherine Moore. And we will end with an educational demonstration highlighting 2001 inductee, Bessie Coleman. Before I hand the mic over to our incredible moderator, I have a few housekeeping notes. Following the educational demonstration, we will host a live question and answer session. You can submit your questions using the comment box on the right-hand side of your screen and anytime during the program. We encourage audience participation in the comments section. Let us know where you're coming from, what you're looking for, and any questions you have for our speakers this evening. Tonight's live stream is also equipped with closed captioning. You have the power to turn off these captions on or off using the closed caption button on the bottom of the video screen. If you experience any technical issues during the live stream, we recommend completely closing the page and then rejoining with the same link. We are using technology that is brand new to us this evening, so we apologize in advance for any errors that may occur. That being said, tonight's event is being recorded and all registrants will receive an email tomorrow morning with a link to the recording where you can rewatch the event or share it with your friends. If you're unsure if you've registered and would like a copy of the recording, please email us at admin@womenofthehall.org and we will add you to our mailing list. In this email, you will be asked to fill out a very brief survey telling us about your experience. Please take a few minutes to complete it. Your feedback is immensely helpful as we continue to grow and improve our virtual programming. As you know, tonight's event is free for all participants. These virtual events are critical to our mission, showcasing great women, inspiring all. And this includes making hall events accessible for all learners, including those with limited physical abilities or lack of financial means. So please consider making a donation to the National Women's Hall of Fame as a not-for-profit by visiting womenofthehall.org/donate or clicking on the link in the event description to show your support. Every dollar helps. If you enjoyed today's program and want to learn more, consider signing up for our email newsletter or follow us on social media @WomenOfTheHall so you can be the first to know about our upcoming events and opportunities to get involved. So, enough housekeeping, let's get started. I'm thrilled to introduce to you our moderator this evening, Sandra Rattley. Sandy has been the executive producer, writer, and director of historical documentary projects, including UNLADYLIKE2020 on PBS. This series of 26 animated documentary shorts profiles diverse and little-known women who made U.S. history 100 years ago and contemporary women who follow in their footsteps. Sandy also wrote, directed, and produced 2 Peabody Award-winning series, making the music hosted by Wynton Marsalis and Wade in the Water, which highlighted 200 years of African American sacred music produced with the Smithsonian Institution. She is a former vice president at NPR, where she launched one of my all-time favorite shows. Wait, don't tell me. Sandy serves as a creative consultant for Black Public Media's 360 Incubator and Pitch Black, a fellowship of African American media makers. And with that, I'll hand it over to Sandy.
Thank you so much, Tatum, and thank you, Jen. Thank you to all the women of the hall. I am Sandy Rattley, and I'm an African-American woman. I have purple and gray dreads. I am sitting in my dining room in Washington, D.C. There is a picture behind me of a seascape from my home village in Ghana, West Africa. I have on a brown dress, and I am wearing burgundy cat eye glasses, and I have on some mixed match earrings. It is just my divine pleasure to be here tonight, to be part of this fabulous evening. And also joining me, I'm very happy to say, are the daughters of the new Woman of the Hall inductee, Katherine Johnson. And so please welcome Joylette Heilig and Katherine Moore.
Good evening. Heilig, which one who speaks first?
Joylette, why don't you go first?
Okay, I'm Joylette Heilig. I prefer the she, her pronouns. I'm a light-skinned, proud Black woman. I have short, curly, white hair. I'm an active 81-year-old. I wear glasses only for reading. I love dressing stylishly with a scarf always, and I have on gold accessories. Interesting, I live in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, which the ladies of the hall might know is also the home of Alice Paul, which is also one of the women from way back. And I went into her house around the corner, and I said, one day you'll have my mother in here with your house. I'm happy to be here, and thank you.
And my name is Katherine Moore. I prefer she, her as pronouns. I'm a Black, caramel-colored, big lady. I am 78 years old. I have short, curly gray hair, and I enjoy accessorizing with jewelry. So I like your mixed earrings.
Thank you very much. I did not mention my pronouns preferred are she and her as well. So we are here this evening to talk about a truly remarkable woman who both of you know very, very well. It's your mom. She's a remarkable woman, a leader, a genius in STEM. We're talking about Katherine Johnson. She was born in 1918 in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. As a child, she actually traveled in a horse-drawn buggy, but she lived through 18 presidents. Her longevity is amazing. Between the ages of 97 and 101, she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Barack Obama, the Congressional Medal of Honor, 13 honorary degrees, had 4 buildings and a bronze statue named in her honor, and got a standing ovation at the Oscars. And that is not even a portion of all of her accomplishments. Working for NASA and its predecessor agency for 33 years, she helped launch Alan Shepard, the first American in space, John Glenn, the first American to orbit Earth. She calibrated the nation's first moon landing, put the first antenna in space, and began to do research on travel to Mars. And again, that's just a portion. So it's very interesting, Joylette, you are a mathematician, and Katherine, you are an educator. And so in some ways, you both follow aspects of your mother's life. Both of your parents were musicians. Your mother loved basketball. She was an avid sewer, cooker, and at the age of 88 took up boxing. So She obviously lived a very, very full life. And we are here talking about unsung genius. So I'm just wondering, from your point of view, obviously spending a lot of time with her, having a lot of years of shared joy with her, how did her genius manifest for the two of you all? How did that show up for you in your regular day-to-day interaction with her?
Well, as the oldest, I guess I was there the longest, but living with a genius, one never, I mean, that didn't come into my vocabulary relating to her until within the last 7 or 8 years when my doctor said, you know, your mom's a genius. Well, it never occurred to me because we can all say our mother was a genius. She never wore any of her attributes on her sleeve. So it was just about doing what you were supposed to do the best that you can do. And she did it. And then she expected us to do it. So that was just the general tenor. It was not an unusual household because of all those women that Margaret Shetterly talked about in Hidden Figures. In the back of the book is the index, which indicates all of the women that were in West Computing. I knew 23 of them. So it was all around us, and they all worked, and they all had families and children and lives because they did not bring their work home like educators did.
What about you, Katherine? What are some of your fondest memories of life at home with your mom, Katherine Johnson?
Well, the real deal was she was mom.
Yes.
She expected us to get our homework. She expected us to finish our chores. And we used to laugh because we didn't have babysitters in our day. Our village was our babysitter. And we get home and she would have chores for us to do. And it usually was so, I mean, she knew how long it took to do everything. So it was done by the time she got home. And if it wasn't, she knew that we had sort of goofed off. So we had to do homework, start our meals, because if you remember, our father died after the movie said we were young, but we were really teenagers just starting. Joylette was in high school and Connie and I were starting. And I can remember we'd ride the bus. We were in segregated schools and she trusted us to come home, or if we were in school activities, we would usually get a ride home with teachers because we were bused quite a distance from our schools and you didn't just walk anywhere. But the teachers were very, very supportive of all the students because they lived where we lived. You know, we knew them either at church or at home. So those were sort of the barriers we had. And what happened is she would come home from work and she would be mom, and we knew nothing about the work. We just knew that we were going to choir rehearsal or we were going to church. And it was just a wonderful, when we look back, not everybody gets a chance to look back and reflect, but I can say it was the best of the worst of times, and it was the best of the best of times.
And you grew up in Hampton.
Newport News and then Hampton, yes. I was born in West Virginia. Joylette was born in Marion, Virginia.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So we covered both families.
Reading your mom's memoir, My Remarkable Journey, I was really struck by some of the quotes and things that really resonated for me, that made it seemed like they really had an indelible mark on her life, and there were ideas that she followed. For example, when she was very young, her father telling her, "You're as good as anyone, but you're no better." And so I can understand hearing that quote, how she had confidence, but yet and still she had humility at the same time. Mm-hmm. And Mrs. Rose Evans, who taught her in high school, saying, "You have to be better today than you were yesterday," and asking, "What do you know today that you didn't know yesterday?" And so to me, that kind of may explain how your mother was constantly pushing to do something new and to learn new things. And then she talked a lot in the book about her math instructor at West Virginia State, Dr. William Waldron Claytor, who told her when she was just 15 years old that she would make a good research mathematician. And she kept saying, well, what is that? And where do I do it? So how do you think these prophetic words from these three people affected her life? And what would you say was her inspiration or her North Star that she was aiming for in her life? I know you said that when she came home, she was just mom, but she must have also shared some of her hopes and dreams with you.
Well, those three instances were the exact things she said to us. I can remember that she used to say so proudly, Dr. William Shuffler and Claytor, and he would walk in with a piece of chalk and go to the board and never use a book. And he would teach her because he saw something in her that was different, that was bright, that was encouraging to push her to as high as he could. So he would create courses that she sometimes took all by herself. And the one Joylette always remembers is analytic geometry of space.
Yeah, and she was the only student. And
the only student. And so she would say to us, I had no idea what he was talking about. She said, but he told me to find out. And you see, she had a way of listening to what her mentors and her teachers told her. And she said they put so much into them that she didn't want to disappoint them. So she was going to do what they expected her to do because they thought she could do it. And that was her mantra. Mm-hmm. I can do it. I will do it.
Yes, yes, yes. So at the age of 34, I mean, you know, she didn't know what it meant to be a research mathematician, but she found out. She started working at NASA. She started in 1953. She was hired, I think, Joylette, as you said, in a segregated West Area computing unit. But very shortly after that, it was only a matter of weeks, she got assigned to the Flight Research Division and to do tedious mathematical calculations manually. So the Soviet Union had just launched Sputnik. It was 1957, and NASA began to feverishly try to get a space shuttle to orbit the Earth. The space race had begun, and Katherine Johnson was really critical to helping to make that happen. In 1960, the Space Task Force, tell me where you want to land it, and I'll tell you where to send our astronaut up from. So in that scene that we saw in Hidden Figures, John Glenn was about to go to orbit on a path that had been plotted by an IBM computer. But he said he wasn't going to go up until, in quotes, the girl checked the numbers. So Katherine Johnson was the error checker for space travel. So, you know, these days we are just into, you know, supercomputers and the computational capacity of computers. And it's really hard to imagine. I've tried to wrap my brain around this. And Joylette, you're a mathematician. Help me out. How did your mama calculate a space mission with a calculator? How was she the one to figure out to the nth fraction how they were going to launch these space vehicles and to land them without a computer, with just a calculator? How did she do that?
Well, I'll start by saying that I was a mathematician, but I was not Katherine. However, I think early on, when she first got to NASA, they were working on airplanes. And what happened, because a small plane crashed, and they had to study what caused this good plane to crash. There's nothing wrong with it. And it had to do with the air draft behind or in front of a new one. Anyway, once they started the space business, they actually had to really start from scratch and work. She said the problem was the engineers had theory, but they needed mathematical equations, and it was mostly driven by geometry. And having this course at the analytics of space, the analytic geometry of space, there were equations to address the control that needed to be had. And so the planes, the missions included a capsule going up and having an orbit or reaching an azimuth and then coming down, but it was an equation. So when they put all of these equations together, what we did as mathematicians before the computers was that you had a great data sheet and you had a mechanical pencil. I haven't seen one lately, but it used to have a thing here that would bring the lead out. And we also had a thing on the desk to sharpen it so that it was always sharp, because you were either putting numbers from a calculator as you were evaluating these large equations with several unknowns. And then once all of these figures, because the engineers would tell you that, well, we need to know from 0 to 10 what goes on. And then there are several other numbers and they all had ranges where you had to do each number in a range. And it goes on the sheet. And then you would plot it using those equations. And then we had on the wall something called French curves. They would look like plexiglass, because when you drew the curves, like from dot to dot to dot, the path always had to be smooth. So you use several of them to smooth out that path. So we did all of that. Well, when computers came in, early on, all of that work that they did would be addressed almost by touching a button once you got some things in. And so people had trouble having faith in it because it happened so fast, when what they did took a longer time. They had to know what went in. The computer doesn't think, it does exactly what you tell it. So when he got ready to fly, apparently there was some discrepancy in some numbers, and she had the reputation of not making a mistake. She said that she always tried to do her best, and when she did, they never would have to bring work back to her. And she said that she just wouldn't have. So she never made a mistake. Well, apparently the girl had that reputation, not necessarily the name, but she had the reputation. So once they started with the computers, he was still concerned, because up there you couldn't make a mistake. She'd say that if you got up there and you didn't get in the proper orbit around, you would end up floating the rest of your life. So it was a building thing for them, because they had to build the concepts. They certainly weren't getting help from the Russians, but always in the back of their mind, they wanted to beat the Russians. Well, the Russians started out ahead of them. And so NASA had to get the best minds that they could find. And ironically, a lot of times they had to go to the HBCUs for the best minds, because our schools graduated those professionals. Even today, the greatest number of Black professionals come from the HBCUs. So it was, that kind of thing that built until they had confidence in the computers.
Today, we are focusing on the stories of unsung women geniuses, Black women who you may not know, whose legacies have continued to affect us every day. And we have the divine honor and privilege to be talking to the daughters of a STEM genius. And we're speaking with Joylette Heilig and Katherine Moore. I'm intrigued because Catherine Johnson was not just a genius in STEM, but she was also a change agent, someone who made space always for others to follow. So your mother said that she was a lifetime member and supporter of the NAACP, but she admitted that she didn't actually go out and protest and picket, but she did change some of the sexist and discriminatory rules in her own way. She was one of the first 3 Black students to integrate West Virginia State 2 decades before the Little Rock 9 desegregated Central High School in Arkansas. And your mom described that she just didn't follow the rules. She did not ever agree to go to the segregated colored bathrooms at NASA. She was the first woman computer to participate in meetings with engineers by simply asking, "Why can't I attend?" And that report that she wrote, the 34-page determination of azimuth angle at burnout for placing a satellite over a selected Earth position. She was the first woman of any race listed as a co-author of a NASA research report. So, Kathy and Joylette, how was your mother able to institute all of these changes in policies and practices? Was she one of the greatest diplomats? Did she just do it with charm? How did she do it?
Mom was
Let me jump in a minute. You just said the word. She was a diplomat because she could get along no matter the age, the color. When she first got her job, the first thing she did when she walked into this big, huge room with all of the engineers with her books and whatever, and she saw an empty desk and put her books down, the man got up and moved. She said, I guess he had somewhere to go, and she sat down. She was fearless. She did not let the small things stop her from doing her job. And I always said that her absolute confidence in herself and her ability made her not bend when she was rebuffed because of who she was. And we admit her skin was light, and some of them probably wondered, but she never didn't tell them who she was. We went one way. When she went home, she turned one way and they went another way. There was no after work fraternizing, because she was actually invited to a wedding of one of the engineers after a while. He and his wife worked there, and the church would not have her there. He said, well, if you're inviting someone of color, you have to get married somewhere else. And she said, no, you won't change your wedding. I will see you. Don't worry about it. And she found another way to do or to get across that hurdle. And I guess we learned it from her. She didn't pick it. She was scared to death when we did. But what she did do was engender the idea that if I had to, I could. And it wasn't that she didn't follow the rules. You had to follow the rules because in those days they'd kill you. But what she did is she knew she had to get back to her job. So she went to the closest bathroom because, yes, the bathrooms for the colored was always either in the basement or in the other building. And she said, I had to get back to work. So I went to the closest one and I went back. She, we say, was fearless and nobody stopped her. She didn't ask a whole lot of questions about, can I use this bathroom? She just said, I had to go to the bathroom. I used it and went back to work. So that's how she handled it.
I think a couple of the things that governed what she did was that, number one, she was practical. If it didn't make sense, she wouldn't do it. If it made sense for her to go to the closest bathroom so she could get back to work, that's where she would go. You would have to explain to her why she had to do something that was not practical. The other thing is that she was a team player. So even as a kid, she wanted everybody around her to know what she did. She never sought to stand out. And so, for example, one time in class as middle school or something, she asked a teacher a question. And the teacher said, Catherine, I know you know the answer. She said, yeah, I do, but they don't. And so she had that sensitivity. And so for that reason, how could you not like her? I mean, you might not like her, but they needed her, first of all, because of her brains. So I said in those early stages, particularly, that education and excellence trumped segregation. They had to have her. And when the men found that out, then as in the meetings, It's like, wait a minute. Catherine asked us that before, but we should have known it inside. And so it was a practical solution that she just would not, she just, in other words, wouldn't do something. She says, do something stupid.
Of course, as you mentioned, she was a team player. In her book, your mother talks a lot about the other Black women who were human computers with her at NASA. They were her neighbors and they were her friends. As you said, they were part of the neighborhood. There were people she went to church with. Dorothy Dot Vaughn, the supervisor of the segregated West Area Computer Unit, lived across the street from your mom's parents in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. Your mom rode to work with Eunice Smith, and Mary Jackson was the first Black engineer at NASA. So these were all people who were part of her circle. And she often said that for all she accomplished, she didn't do any of it alone. And she couldn't understand why she was getting so much attention and so much fuss was being made over her. For example, in 2016, NASA named a newly built building, the Katherine G. Johnson Computational Research Facility. So how do you think that the other Black women who did similar work at NASA should be remembered? What do you think would be a worthy honor for them and their work?
Well, we always try to include them in our discussions with people. Mom just had a different assignment. She may have been a little more forward speaking and asking questions, and the fearlessness just showed itself, but not in a bad way, because she would never try to upstart somebody. Like she would never try to embarrass somebody. And I think she knew that she said Ms. Vaughn was the smartest person she knew. Now, why would she say that if she felt so full of herself? So she evaluated people for just what they could do. The only thing she had problems with if people didn't do the best that they could. When she taught school, I remember she taught a year before she went to NASA when we moved there, because they had met the quota for the year. And one of the students that we knew said, I learned more from your mother as a substitute teacher than my teacher the whole year, because Mom always wanted somebody to learn, somebody else to learn. And teachers and parents should know that when you show the interest in your children, when you challenge your children, they will do what you expect. They will try to please you. But if you make the bar very low, unless they're very exceptional, they're going to try something else because you haven't challenged them. So she always included, and then we call her the fourth hidden figure, who was not in the movie because of time, was Christine Darden. Christine was in my class, and she did similar things. And every time we get the opportunity, we say to people or to whatever audience has invited Mom for something, please don't wait till she's 90 to have her come and talk about, because she's been all over the world talking about her exceptional talents. And it's just how you share. If you keep it, she says, if you know and don't share, what good is it? So it's always reaching out and giving. That she just did that, and they were always included. Can't hear Kathy.
Kathy, do you have your mic muted?
They have to.
There you go.
I just wanted to ad lib and tell you that, in all fairness, the movie came out after the two ladies that were in there with her had passed. And had it not, we think, been for the movie, NASA may not have made the big forward jump to recognize these Black women. So it wasn't what we thought and how we felt. It was what did they think and what did they feel. I appreciate the fact that they finally let the book it came out, and we were just so sad that the ladies were gone. But their granddaughter and Miss Vaughn's daughter would travel. We'd all travel together sometimes to different things. So they were honored, but it was different. And we, like Joylette says, we just try to know where the source, where it came from.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think that your mom, learning more about your mom has inspired me in so many ways. You'll notice that of everybody who described themselves, I didn't give my age, but I am definitely in the elder category. But one of the things that really impressed me about your mom was she mentions that she was in her 80s and she went to the doctor, and the doctor said, that as you begin to age, these things are going to happen. And it's so boring when you go to the doctor now, and every time they say, they preface everything, well, it's part of the age. It's part of the aging process. Your muscles, this and that. Nobody wants to hear that. So your mom basically said that she was going to make sure that she lived every year to the fullest. And she did live a very full life. And one of the astronauts, one of the Black female astronauts who she became very close to, talks about having a conversation with your mother when your mother was 100 years old. And this woman was about to go to space, go to the moon, be part of the space station or something. And your mother told her that the most important thing to do at this point was to build a garden on the moon, and was telling her the soil composition and the nitrogen and all this that needed to be part of the experiment. At 100 years old, she was still given directions and coming up with creative ideas. So from your perspective, again, what do you feel like her secret to longevity was?
Just living each day.
I was going to say she was authentic. She was who she was.
Growing up in West Virginia, and we think it also had to do with the fact that Granddaddy was the person that he was, and they had wholesome food. They grew their food. They even grew some of the animals that they ate, from chickens and whatever. But I think eating wholesomely gives you a lot of pluses for how your life ends up being.
And your quality of life. Yeah.
That's right. They didn't smoke. They didn't drink. She had very little. I still don't. It's just, I mean, you can look at kids and people and see that they drink or smoke. You can see that. But those who do it don't really see it. So I think just living a wholesome life. And again, it wasn't anything. I mean, we had fried chicken. We ate, a lot of things, but we just didn't go beyond what made sense, as she would say.
And I think her faith kept her grounded, kept her always mindful of others. I think when you live outside of yourself and reach out, and he reaches down, you're protected. I know that sounds corny to some people, but she believed that. We grew up in the church, but it wasn't pounded on you. It was a welcoming place, because that was one of the few places you could go as Blacks in those days. She was born during Depression. She was, her parents were in the church. Her father started helped build the church. They were simple, working folk. And my grandmother, even back in the early 1900s, had been to school. She was a teacher. So they were starting from the education key was important. And when she got to the right teachers, then the parents, just the push for everybody was just awesome. And she followed and she fed it to us. And we try to do it with our kids. Joylette's son was a math student. My son is in IT. They all have tried to live up to Grandma. They call her G-Ma. There's 6 grandchildren, and they've all tried to be something she would have been proud of. They work at it because they say she sits on their shoulder.
That's an amazing guardian to have sitting on your shoulder.
Yeah.
So Joylette and Katherine, thank you for the amazing insights and reflections you've shared about your mother, STEM genius, and our heroine, Katherine Johnson. So before we wrap up, I have one last question. And it's a long question, and it's a question that we could keep talking about for a long time. But what if the Presidential Medal of Freedom had not been given to your mom by Barack Obama? And what if Margot Lee Shetterly hadn't written that book, Hidden Figures, the true story of 4 Black women and the space race? What if the movie Hidden Figures hadn't been made? What if Katherine Johnson hadn't been inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame? Would we know her? Would we know about her? Would we know her story? Would future generations have her amazing legacy to follow? Why is it that there are so many Black women like her whose stories are lost, forgotten, not told? Why is it important to teach your mother's story and the accomplishments of other unsung Black women geniuses? And what do you think is the cost and the loss to us as a society to not know who these important active agents of our history?
Well, I'd like to start. Mom liked being an inspiration. She loved young children, young people, and she loved people that wanted to learn. And I think if all of those what ifs, we would not have heard about her. There would not have been the inspiration that she has provided for people. Both of us have notebooks full of letters from high school kids, little ones, kids from England, kids from Quebec, Canada, cards from Australia. She got a degree from South Africa. All of those things would not have happened had, I think, Charles Bolden, who was the NASA administrator under President Obama, gave a speech at her college for graduation. And he used Mom as the basis of his speech. We knew nothing about it. I didn't know till way after till the next year. And he was a Black astronaut, had been on 4 missions, had commanded 2. So I think he was the one that told President Obama about it. But the point is, and it's so frustrating when you hear now that people don't want books in schools, don't want books in libraries. How are you going to find out about us? And you never will. So then there are our kids growing up with no examples of what you can do. You have to be white to achieve. And that's just not the case. And so we hope that her story just and that's what the children tell us, the Blacks and the whites, because the white kids, why did they treat her like that? They see it. So it's about education. We have to educate. And just because you find out bad things that happened, you learn from the bad things. It's not a sweet apple pie kind of life. And children have to have examples of people that look like them to think that they can achieve things. Otherwise, they think, oh, well, I can't do that. And that's just not fair.
We only have a minute left, but wrap it up for us.
Kathy.
I think my first thought was, if it had not been for Black Lives Matter or diversity and inclusion, the push that something wasn't right. You know, when I taught, I said quickly to my young white teachers that I was in charge of, have you ever read an Ebony magazine? Have you ever looked at Black Enterprise? And I would even ask people today, how many of your white counterparts have read our culture and seen that we're not just in the crime stories, we're in all stories. Our women are fabulous. They do wonderful things. They create, they run restaurants, they do it all. And yet we aren't at the table. So I would encourage anybody that's listening who wants to know more about different cultures, you have to do the homework. You have to be interested enough to look.
The legacy of Katherine Johnson is alive and well with Joylette Heilig and Katherine G. Moore. Thank you for being the storytellers, the wisdom keepers, and sharing your reflections with us this evening. And you just created a beautiful segue because we're about to go into an education segment about some of the work that I did with my collaborator, Charlotte Mangin. And I want to welcome back Jen Gabriel, who is the executive director of the Women's Hall of Fame. Oh, I'm sorry, Tatum.
Yes, I know. Disappointing that I am not.
You are not. I'm not co-signing that with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandy, Joylette, and Katherine for such a wonderful discussion. Now, as Sandy was saying, we're going to transition into the second portion of this event, in which we will share educational resources. For our educators in the room, you will especially benefit as we dive into how easily to integrate women's stories into your classroom and at home. First up, we will hear from Charlotte Mangin, who will introduce our Spotlight educational resource, Unladylike 2020. Charlotte is an award-winning documentary filmmaker and the creator, executive producer, director, and writer of Unladylike 2020, an innovative animated documentary series about unsung women who changed America at the turn of the 20th century. After Charlotte, we will have an educational demonstration to show just how easy it is to integrate the unladylike videos into classroom curriculums. The educational demonstration will be led by Sandy Goldberg, Education Director in the Kids Media and Education Department at the WNET Group, the New York metro area's flagship public media station. Charlotte, take it away.
Hi, thank you so much for the kind introduction, and thank you for the National Women's Hall of Fame for inviting us to participate in this fabulous event. My name is Charlotte Mangin. As you heard, I've been a documentary filmmaker for over 20 years. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a white woman, 45 years old, with short brown hair and glasses, sitting in front of some works of modern art. If you could please pull up the slide deck. So I'm happy to be with you tonight to tell you about Unladylike 2020. Next slide. The way it all began is that a decade or so ago, my two boys and I visited an Air and Space Museum and happened to be there on a day that a children's book author was doing a launch event for a new picture book called Soar Eleanor. We were fascinated to discover the story of an aviator named Eleanor Smith, who in 1927, at age 16, became the youngest licensed pilot in the world. When the men at her airfield on Long Island didn't believe that, quote, a girl could fly, she took up a dare to fly under a bridge. You may know this was the time when barnstorming, these crazy aerial stunts in little rickety biplanes, was a popular form of public entertainment. So Eleanor Smith proceeded to fly not under one, but all four bridges of the East River in New York City to really prove herself, dodging boat traffic along the way and even tipping sideways to squeeze between two oncoming ships under the Brooklyn Bridge, earning her the nickname the Flying Flapper. She went on to become a celebrated test pilot, broke a number of endurance records, was actually the first woman ever featured on a Wheaties cereal box, and late in her career worked with NASA on shuttle landing simulators. After hearing her story, I was so inspired, but also deeply frustrated. Why had I never heard of Eleanor Smith? I thought there was only Amelia Earhart, right? And as you'll see from the slide, if you can read the quote, she was a particularly feisty woman. So I started to research Eleanor, and she led me to other women in aviation, and they led me to women in other professional fields. I spent weeks and weeks and weeks in the New York Public Library, flipping through out-of-print encyclopedias, biographies, and uncovered a treasure trove of life stories from the turn of the 20th century. What blew me away especially was how many of these women I had never heard of. Each was more extraordinary than the next from all walks of life, and overcame severe sexism and racism to pave the way for future generations of empowered women such as us. Why were they not part of mainstream history, or at least the history that I was taught growing up and that my children were getting in their classrooms today? Next slide, please. So when I realized that the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage was in 2020, I knew there could not be a more fitting time to elevate these stories from a century or so ago. And as a documentary filmmaker who's worked with PBS and specifically WNET, New York City's public TV station, for most of my career, I knew I had to find a way to bring this hidden history back to life and also have an impact in the education space, expanding the way in which human history is taught and what is taught in the classroom. So UNLADYLIKE2020 was born. As you heard at the beginning, it's an innovative multimedia series profiling little-known history makers, many of whom were often the first in their professional fields, accomplishing amazing feats before and just after women had won the right to vote. And we also featured contemporary women who are following in their footsteps today. I was so blessed that this evening's moderator, my illustrious colleague, Sandra Rattley, was interested in joining the project as executive producer early on. And because Archive of These Women was limited, we partnered with an artist who not only helped fill in the visual gaps with beautiful art and animation, but also brought a unique look to the series, very different than your typical history documentary. We wanted the past to feel alive, relevant, and also appeal to intergenerational audiences, and especially youth who might otherwise think, oh, black and white archival images are boring. So I want to share with you the series trailer that gives you a taste of that innovative visual approach.
We take many things for granted today without recognizing how many shoulders these were built upon.
Life in the U.S. at the turn of the 20th century is quite a complicated story. Rapid industrialization, urbanization, immigrant communities, new employment opportunities, educational opportunities. Women demanded new space and pushed the boundaries of what being a lady means.
She was liberated long before we ever started stumbling around in the dark about what it means to be a liberated woman. Women were always daredevils.
Once you get a taste for it, it's very hard to turn back.
She was an unlikely candidate to be out chasing polar bears. When you think of all the additional challenges and all the additional hurdles that they had, it was dangerous to try to climb a mountain in petticoats.
We have to remember, it was still before women had the right to vote. Women were supposed to act a certain way, be told what to do, how to speak, what to wear.
Taking this step to run for office really challenged the notion of how far women can go in a leadership role.
Those are cruel times. We're talking about Jim Crow, lynchings. It was hard enough for white women. For a black woman, it was nearly insane. She had no peers.
She pushed against the odds and disrupted the status quo.
Everyone thought she was crazy.
She wasn't willing to compromise, and she saw no need to compromise.
Some would say she was ahead of the time. I think she was on time, and the time needed to catch up to her.
Thank you. So we were so lucky to partner early on with American Masters, the flagship biography series on PBS, and with WNET's education team. And we created 26 animated digital shorts. They're each 9 to 12 minutes long, a 1-hour documentary television special that's focused on women in civil rights and in the suffrage movement, and a suite of educational resources on PBS Learning Media, which my colleague Sandy Goldberg will be presenting to you soon. But first, I am so proud to share with you the pilot episode for the series. It's about aviator Bessie Coleman, who in 1921 was the first African American to earn an international pilot's license and was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in 2001. Astronaut Mae Jemison, who was the first Black woman in space and whose career was, of course, made possible by the work of Catherine Johnson, actually brought a photo of Bessie Coleman with her on her first mission aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour in 1992. So the legacy paved by these Black women in STEM is long and deep. Without further ado, here is the genius of Bessie Coleman.
Her dream was to become a pilot, but her real ambition was to open up a flying school so that other Blacks would be a part of this new industry.
They say I don't act right, it's unladylike, how I wanna live my life.
1919, Chicago, Illinois. 27-year-old Bessie Coleman worked as a manicurist in a barbershop. She was inspired by the story of Harriet Quimby, the first woman to earn a pilot's license in the U.S. Then Coleman overheard customers talking about European women who served as combat pilots during World War I.
I thought, that's it, I'm gonna be a pilot. And everybody started laughing at me. Girl, sit down and grab that nail file. You ain't flying no plane.
The aviation industry back at that time, it was a white man's world. It was hard enough for white women. For a Black woman, it was nearly insane to choose that industry.
I refuse to take no for an answer. If I can create the minimum of my plans and desires, there shall be no regrets.
One of 13 children, Coleman was born in 1892 in Atlanta, Texas, and grew up in a small cabin in Waxahachie. Her parents were African-American sharecroppers, her father part Cherokee.
Bessie was born literally on a dirt floor and picked cotton alongside her mom. There weren't any opportunities, quite frankly, in that time frame for a Black woman, but she had bigger dreams.
I want to find a bigger life. I want to amount to something.
To be a pilot, you have to be adventurous. There's a fearless factor to it. I'm the first and only Black female to fly the U-2 aircraft. And we don't have a lot of women in aviation. So our cadre is very small. Bessie Coleman was able to up the bar in terms of who could fly, despite gender and racial barriers of that time.
In 1915, Coleman joined the Great Migration north to Chicago, along with millions of other African Americans determined to escape racial violence and find new job opportunities. The 1896 Supreme Court case Plessy v. Ferguson had legalized racial segregation, ushering in a new era of racism against African Americans.
"1919 was the year of the Red Summer. A race war broke out across the country. That was the time of Birth of a Nation, the most racist film in American history that was based on the book, The Klansman. All across the South and parts of the North, there were lynchings. Harsh, harsh, soul-crushing times.
After 4 years of working in Chicago, in a barber shop and a restaurant, Coleman started applying to flight schools throughout the country, but no one would teach her.
Everyone thought she was crazy. She was A, Black, B, a woman. When she realized that she needed help, she went to Robert Abbott, the owner of the Chicago Defender, plead her case to him about why it was important for there to be a Negro woman flying. He was really impressed by her and stepped in to support her in sponsorship.
After a year of French lessons, Coleman went to France in 1920 to enroll at a prestigious aviation school.
She didn't face the same obstacles in France. All they cared about was whether or not you had the courage and the willingness to learn how to fly.
You've never lived until you've flown. The air is the only place free from prejudice.
Like her, I like to push myself to that next level. How far can I take it? How much better can I be as a pilot? The U-2 is a challenging aircraft to fly. It's not for the weak at heart. You have a spacesuit. We fly typically above 70,000 feet. You start seeing the curvature of the Earth. You get to see how small the planet really is in comparison to the universe. Why are we so focused on skin color? There's just so much more out there.
Bessie went on to become the first, not only the first female Black pilot, but she was the first to hold an international license to fly.
Coleman returned to America and became an instant sensation as a barnstormer, the latest craze in public entertainment.
In early aviation, it's seat of the pants flying, like the Wild West.
All of them risked their lives. Every single time they decided to jump out of a plane, to walk on a wing, to do a figure eight. These planes were open air.
As she performed around the country, Coleman used her newfound celebrity to take a stand against racism.
Bessie Coleman was an activist. She refused to perform in air shows where Blacks were not allowed to use the front entrance. Jim Crow laws were very broad. People couldn't sit together, they couldn't come in together. She wasn't having any of that.
Black should not have to experience the difficulties I have faced. So I decided to open a flying school and teach other Black women to fly, for accidents may happen, and there would be someone to take my place.
In 1923, Coleman succeeded in buying her own plane. A month later, it was demolished in a crash near Santa Monica, California. Coleman was pulled unconscious from the wreckage.
She broke several ribs and her leg. And from the bed, she said, "You tell the world."
You tell the world I'm coming back. The fact that I'm alive proves that flying in the air is no more dangerous than riding in an automobile on the ground.
In 1925, Coleman made her comeback with a barnstorming tour throughout Texas, including a flight in her hometown of Waxahachie.
Coming home to her family and seeing the pride in their faces and have all these people cheering, that's success.
In 1926, while preparing for an air show in Jacksonville, Florida, Coleman was thrown from the open cockpit of a plane some 2,000 feet to her death. She was 34.
Her story is one of perseverance, overcoming barriers. Keep wanting, push harder. Don't give up.
Coleman's dream of opening a flight school for African-American pilots came true in 1929 when the Bessie Coleman Aero Club was founded by her friend and fellow aviation pioneer, William Powell. It inspired many outstanding Black pilots, including the Tuskegee Airmen of World War II.
And year after year, they would fly low, drop flowers onto her grave in her memory. It's about the spirit of going for your dreams. When you are focused and determined, there are no limits. And she really proved that to us.
You can be somebody. You can fly high just like me.
Wasn't that great? I have seen that video so many times, and every time I see it, it's like I'm seeing it for the first time. Hi, everybody. I'm Sandy Goldberg, and my pronouns are she, her. I am a white woman with short gray hair, and I'm wearing blue-rimmed reading glasses. There's some framed photographs behind me, and there's a black bookcase to my right. As Tatum said, I'm the education director at the WNET Group, home to 3 public television stations in the New York metro area. Channel 13 in New York City, WLAW21 on Long Island, and the New Jersey PBS network. So the digital resources we had the great pleasure to create for the Unladylike series are available free of charge on the PBS Learning Media platform. And Natalie has so graciously shared my screen for me already. So I'm going to take you on a little tour of the site in just a moment. If you're not familiar with it, PBS Learning Media is a free online site with a treasure trove of high-quality, research-based resources drawn from critically acclaimed PBS programs such as American Experience, Nature, and American Masters, and from expert content contributors like the National Archives, the Library of Congress, and NASA. We like to say that the resources on PBS Learning Media are purpose-built. That means we don't just segment long documentaries into smaller chunks for classroom viewing. Instead, we carefully watch each program and select short 5 to 10 minute teachable moments and use those to build out each resource. We pair the videos with support materials to create a package of content that can be used to enrich curriculum. The site automatically geolocates and provides state-specific standards for each resource. You can see that this page says it's for New York educators. I think you can see that. No, it's cut off. Anyway, but it does say that my local station, and it doesn't even have my local station on it. Okay, never mind. So the site is organized by subject and grade level, and the homepage always features timely highlighted resources. It's also worth noting that the website is fully integrated with Google Classroom, making it a useful tool for hybrid, remote, and at-home learning. So Natalie is going to share a link to some tutorials that will help you make the most of what this site has to offer. So before I show you the Unladylike resources, I want to show you something that I discovered as I was preparing this presentation. I'm going to go ahead and type Catherine Johnson in the search bar here. And look, the good people at West Virginia Public Broadcasting published this wonderful resource about her life and career. The video includes some of what we learned about her today and more, but it's in a format that you can easily share with your students. So there are accompanying discussion questions and an extension activity. So what they've done is they've taken some of these lessons to be learned from Katherine Johnson from the NASA website. You heard some of these today. And they asked students to think about each of these quotes as they watch the video and be ready to discuss how her life is an example of each. So one thing that I learned while watching this video that I didn't know is that Katherine Johnson is featured in a Women of NASA Lego set. I didn't even know they had a Women of NASA Lego set. So in the extension activity with this resource, students are asked to research other women of NASA that are included in the Women of NASA Lego set, including Mae Jemison, the first African-American woman in space. Okay, so now I'm going to navigate to the Unladylike collection. And to get to any place here, you can just in the search bar, type the keyword. And then you see that I get 32 search results. And there are a couple of resources here, but what I want is the collection page. So I'm going to go right here to the Unladylike collection. And here we are. So this collection includes 26 video resources, one for each of the women featured in the Unladylike series, 5 interactive student-facing lessons, and 4 professional development webinar recordings. It's organized around topics like activism and politics, the Chinese Exclusion Act, immigration, suffrage, and women in STEM, just to name a few. Each individual resource includes a full episode from the Unladylike 2020 series. As you just saw, they run about 9 to 12 minutes. And the resources provide a variety of standards-aligned support materials for grades 6 through 12, designed to develop students' historical thinking skills and help them make connections between past and present. So I also want to point out that this resources in this collection are aligned with progressive era topics. So the idea is to integrate these women's stories into units typically taught in US history classes, which is to say these resources are meant to be used all year, not just during Women's History Month in March or in February for Black History. And yes, I think they can also be used in STEM classrooms. So because the Bessie Coleman film that you just watched tackles Jim Crow and race relations as well as women in STEM, the resource is listed in both. So I'm going to click right here and navigate to it. And here we go. Bessie Coleman is right here. And so here is the video that you just watched that's available to see. As you saw, the video touches on several different topics, from the Great Migration to Jim Crow and Birth of a Nation. These topics are all covered in other PBS learning media resources that you can find here in this section called You Might Also Like. And so that makes it easy to extend the learning and make connections to a larger lesson or unit. I also want to add that PBS Learning Media has resources on the Red Summer of 1919 and the Tuskegee Airmen, which were also discussed in the video, but there's only room to show 4 here. So I would encourage you to search the site to see what else you might find that connects with your lessons. So the support materials here are organized into 2 sections. There are support materials for teachers and support materials for use with students. The teacher support materials include an activity where students examine and respond to primary source documents. In this case, 2 newspaper articles, which you actually saw captured in the video. So in just a minute, we're going to take a look at the handout in the students section that has focus questions and the articles themselves. But after responding to the questions, students are asked to write a short article describing how journalists might cover Bessie Coleman's story today. There's also an extension activity where students compare and contrast 2 additional newspaper articles about Bessie Coleman, specifically to analyze what they tell us about the perspectives of their authors. So I'm going to close this and let's take a look at the support materials for use with students. So there are discussion questions here to check for understanding, and they include both comprehension questions and open-ended critical thinking questions to help students make connections with larger themes. So this section also includes the handouts. So I'm going to just click on this one here. And this is the one that has the 2 articles that you saw in the video. And there are focus questions here to help the students delve deeper and really think critically about what's happening in the videos. And I'm just going to scroll through and show you there's the second article right here. Okay, and thanks to a partnership with the Haas Center for Public Service at Stanford University, all the support materials in the Unladylike collection are also available in Spanish. So right here, you can just see everything here is in Spanish, and it's organized exactly the same way that the content on the site is organized. And finally, as with most of our resources, we provide some key vocabulary to ensure that all students, including English language learners, fully comprehend the video and the related activities. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have during the Q&A period that is going to start in just a few minutes. So be sure to post any questions you have in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandy and Charlotte. This is amazing. I might be singing that song the rest of the night. So the Unladylike docu-series is one of the few hundred resources that the National Women's Hall of Fame has to offer for teachers and parents alike. On our website, under the Educational Resources tab, I would like to briefly walk you through our site so you know how to find this information. So start on our website, womenofthehall.org, make your way to the main menu, and scroll down to educational resources. You'll see that we have broken resources down by target age group, elementary, middle school, and high school, plus. Then on each page, resources are categorized by media platform. We have podcasts, books, games, videos, you name it. One of our favorite resources is the newly launched Catherine Johnson Foundation website. Here, you can see all of the resources recommended by the Catherine Johnson Foundation, where you can learn about Catherine, her life, and legacy. So, after what I'm sure feels like an information overload, let's transition into our Q&A section of the evening. If you haven't already been submitting questions, please do that in the comment section now. And I will ask that all of our presenters are brought back on screen. And Sandy, I will turn things over to you.
Thank you. And Tatum, we agree, Charlotte and I never get tired of the Unladylike anthem. And Sandy, if you heard it a few dozen times, we've heard it a few hundred times, but it still holds up. And we're holding the Unladylike anthem high. And we thank all of our participants today for each in your own way doing something that is extending the legacy and the visibility and the legacy and agency of women. So thank you all for that. So we've got a couple of questions that have come in already. And so there are a couple of questions for Katherine and for Joylette. Mandy B wanted to know, how do you keep Katherine Johnson's legacy alive within your family?
We give everything we get, we share. That's first. Like when we got the medals, we ordered enough to give each of the grandchildren one that they can share with their families. We try to include them in as many of the activities. They were able to go, 4 of the 6 were able to go to the Oscars. They all got to go to the White House. And whenever we can, they are a part of the activities. They're young, so they have jobs, and it's a lot different for them. But otherwise, we are in the process now of using a lot of her memorabilia that won't be a part of the West Virginia University's archives. We will share some of those. So they will each get, for instance, my son will get everything I have, Joylette's son, but the granddaughter, Joylette can tell you more about her. We have it's mom's great granddaughter, Joylette. Tell them about Nakia.
Lives in Newport News. She's the daughter of one of the youngest grandsons.
Next to the youngest, yeah.
In the 3rd grade, she made a perfect score on the SOL, which the educators know about. And so they had an awards program, but they usually didn't have 3rd graders speaking. And she said, well, I want to speak. And so she got up and gave her speech. And then where they thought it was over, they applauded. And she said, just a minute. She said, I'm not through yet. I want to say how much my great-grandmother inspired me and how I will continue to work hard and achieve like she did. So we still have gatherings, but like she said, the younger ones work. We couldn't do what we do if we were still working. So the flip side was that's what made it possible for us to do as much of the things that we do.
For the two of you. So Joylette and Katherine, how old were you before you realized, this is from Terry Tanny, how old were you before you realized how important your mom was? Well, of course she was important to you, but to the world.
Well, to the world, I guess when the movie came out, but if we go back, I was in college in Greensboro, North Carolina, and you know how quiet a library is. I looked on the counter and there's this huge picture of my mother. and it's the Pittsburgh Courier, which was a Black newspaper, with the story that gave her credit for getting the man to the moon. And I went and called her. I said, Mom, you didn't tell me this. And it was that she had done this work and the man asked to be interviewed. And in the book, actually, I think it's on page 166, she explained how when he came and asked her, she said if she thought it would help students to learn about it, then she would use it. She said on March 10th, 1962, the national edition of the Pittsburgh Courier, I was shocked. There was a big photo of me stretched 3 columns across the front page. So she did not like and did not brag, but when others came to ask her, could they make an article or do something, she would say, well, if it'll help the students, if it'll help young people, do it.
Mm-hmm. So we have another question from Mandy. And in your mom's book, she does mention Taraji P. Henson coming to visit her. So the question was, how involved in the production was your mother in terms of Hidden Figures, and did she and Taraji P. Henson work together?
Well, Taraji came to her home just to meet her and see how she, to see what she was about. And the input that she had, we didn't have any input in the movie. Margot did quite a bit of question and answer and interviewing of her in the development of the book, but we were not consulted on the movie.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have a couple of other questions. Can you tell us about the research that was done prior to Hidden Figures? So are there, other than the book that obviously preceded the movie, and you mentioned, Katherine, the Pittsburgh Courier article, is there any other research that you know of that has been done on your mother, other than, of course, the all of the things that you all have collected? I know, Joylette, you were telling me about an exhibit that was done in Philadelphia in the 90s?
1977.
Oh, in the 1970s.
Right. But before that, I'll tell you about that. But before that, I saw an article in 1961 where they stated about the achievements that she made and the contributions to the space program. And I think that preceded the one that Cathy saw at Bennett. But the one in Philadelphia, this was an exhibit sponsored by the Philadelphia Electric Company. And it was a tribute to Black scientists and engineers. There were 24 people in this exhibit. And the lady that they hired to draw profiles of each of the people said, well, you don't have any women in here. And they said, we don't know any. She said, well, I do. And so I didn't know the lady and didn't meet her after that event, but she was in there. So I think, then I think also that Mr. Evans, the husband of the woman that was her teacher for a while, worked for he was under civilian Secretary of Defense back in the day under some Eisenhower or somebody. He needed her picture to go into a government document. So they were doing things, we just didn't know about them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But it's, you just have to look. But right now, if you go to nasa.gov, they've got so much information that you just wouldn't believe. We have it in our new website. We have a lot of information there, but there's a lot more in the nasa.gov website.
So folks really want to know a lot about your lives. There's one question that says, what was your life like when your mother's work began to gain recognition? it must have been overwhelming to go from being a, in quotes, normal person to receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom overnight. So did her schedule start getting hectic? Was she going all over the place? Were you all traveling with her? How did your life change?
Well, you see, she was 97 when this started. So we picked and chose very carefully what she was able to do, because by then she was in the assisted living facility, and our father was
I don't know who is making all that.
unable to travel with us most of the time.
Mhm.
So if it was local, we were able to take her and him, take both of them. If it was out of town, she was able to go to White Sulphur one time. She was able, well, twice. We took her when they did the
library.
The library.
Mhm.
But most of the time, Joylette and I represented, and we went as far. We've done conferences all over the country, and our biggest was, she said, well, you have to go to South Africa if they ask me. I can't go, but you go. So we broke down and we went, and it was life-changing.
I know it was a long flight. So that's when she received one of her honorary doctorate degrees.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
And we just got a request last week that the Nelson Mandela University in South Africa wants to rename one of their buildings on campus after her.
I just got chills when you said that.
Yeah.
So the things keep coming, but they're also in doing our own research. She traveled a lot while she was working. We looked, she had been on a conference at MIT. We didn't know, we never knew about it, but government doesn't do great things when you travel. It's lean and quick and in and out, but she traveled, but luckily I think this happened. We said, why did it take so long? But had we still worked, it would have been very difficult to do what we've done. The first years after our retirement was caring for them. But then when this happened, we just have developed a whole new life. She would go, if you ask her, she would go. She'll say, what the astronaut, Dr. Cagle that you spoke of earlier, she said, Miss Johnson, no, she called her Dr. Mommy. She said, Dr. Mommy, I want to go to Mars. Would you go with me? She said, in a heartbeat. And she meant it. So she's still, reaching always.
See, it's interesting. Dr. Cagle writes in the foreword to her book, and she says, which was amazing, that your mom said that she wanted to go to space. So.
Well, when they sent up a satellite back in February 20th, actually last year, named the SS Katherine Johnson. And so that was the first time one of the satellites was named for anybody or for a female. And so we weren't able to go because of COVID, but it went up off of Wallops Island. And so when you hear the announcement, the normal -3, 2, 1, and then they get up in the plane and they said the SS Katherine Johnson is in full speed. And I said, she went to space anyway.
She made it. She made it. She took off.
Right.
A couple of more questions. You said that most of the Grands got a chance to go to the film premiere, went to the Oscars. How did you all celebrate the film?
We just tried to keep up with the schedule and keep her, because if she went somewhere, we had to have aides and special travel or whatever, because we had a big celebration for her 101st birthday, for her 100th birthday, for her 99th. And she did go to New York, of course. They did a special screening at the Air and Space Museum in Hampton, and Octavia Spencer was there for that.
And Dr. Bolden.
Who?
Dr. Bolden.
Oh, yeah. And in fact, our sorority is putting up markers in 2 weeks at the Air and Space Museum for the 3 ladies that were in the movie. So things continue to go. You know, she had a bench there in Hampton. So we took her to everything that she could go to that we could maneuver or to get her without, without pushing the button too hard. Because she would always say yes, but it was like, no, no, Mom.
And
Not.
you see, one more thing is finances are always part of it. We didn't have the conduit to have film made. We didn't have the publishers to have the books made until they came to us, you know. So it was like she would have lived her whole life just being our mom, and that was good enough for me. But the point that they recognized her once the book came out, we could not share her with the world.
Absolutely.
She was a part of that. That's what we're trying to say now, that you have to open up the world because we're a part of it. And by we mean people of color, brown and Black people. That was a wonderful program. Both Charlotte, I'm sorry, I'm saying your name wrong, but the presentation and Sandy, yours, they were elegant. They were wonderful. And I just hope people see them for what they are. So thank you.
Thank you. I forgot. I put on my Bessie Coleman button late.
I saw it. Yeah.
But thank you so much. So you just
wait a minute. I'd like to say one other thing. During the development of the movie, I guess Ted Melfi, who was the director, came to visit her maybe 2 or 3 times before and a couple times during. And every time he came to visit, he was in awe. He was almost in tears. He just was just so honored to be around her. And so I always say, any complaint anybody made, I said, he had to tell all of this in 2 hours. So he did the best job he could. And we appreciated that. Yeah. And the people were just very, very helpful. They were very supportive. And Taraji she said, I want to come there. She came with her publicist. There was no fanfare. She wasn't dressed up. She didn't want to see anybody. And we just came in. A couple of the grands got to see her. But, you know, as the movie, we got to go to one viewing in Atlanta when they were filming there. But other than that.
So, Joylette, I think you said today that your website, the Catherine Johnson Foundation website, launched.
Yes.
Can you make sure you give the information for that so that people can get additional information? And please tell us what other projects you and the foundation are working on so that people in the audience will know what they should keep their eyes out for.
Well, we're in the early stages. I mean, the website came out yesterday, and we have the ability to receive funds, but our main focus will be on giving scholarships to underprivileged or people who are in need of finances, especially as funds are ballooning these days. And we'll concentrate on the STEM fields just to help them get into that field that some of them think that they couldn't do. So there's a place for news and events. We haven't put anything in there yet about that, but it's a work in progress. So again, the foundation at this point will be mostly to help students go to school.
Excellent. So since we've been talking a lot about education, I just want my colleagues to also have an opportunity to talk about the educational resources we've developed for UNLADYLIKE2020 as well. So one of the questions was, how have educators used UNLADYLIKE in the classroom? One of the resources we developed for the series is a self-directed interactive, self-directed for students, interactive lesson called a gallery walk, and it focuses on 3 Indigenous women that we feature in the series. And it was developed by two teachers who basically looked at our materials and came up with, it's called a gallery walk, in which they use artifacts from our three films and create kind of a gallery walk so that students can visit the artifacts and interact with them. And one of the educators, who's a man from Texas, told us that when he showed the Unladylike series and the educational materials to his class, they got so excited that they were also taking a class on technology and wanted to start using their 3D printers to create unladylike merchandise for us. So we think that the thing, as Charlotte mentioned, what we were going for was trying to make sure that it could appeal to young people, that the pacing and that the colors and that the editing and the music all made it feel like something that young people would be interested in. So Sandy, I know you staged 4 professional development workshops for teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And teachers who were using the material also talked about the success that they've had in the classroom. Do you want to share a couple of those examples for us?
You know, somebody just told me yesterday about a teacher in Queens, New York, who is also a film teacher and teaches kids video production skills. And so they watched videos and then found another woman, either somebody in their family or somebody who was important to them, and did a video about them. So it was a jumping off point for students to do their own research and create their own content that was similar. But it's been really inspiring for a lot of teachers. And I'm surprised, like there are a lot of teachers who use it in their English classes, like ELA teachers. So it's being used in a variety of different classrooms. So, and you know, the resources that we provide, the support materials, are just a suggestion. It's not meant to be a curriculum or a set lesson plan. It's sort of a toolbox, if you will, so that you can pick and choose whatever pieces you'd like to use in your classroom and find different ways to integrate it in what you might already be teaching.
And Sandy, Charlotte and I have got to say, it's been such a divine privilege to be able to collaborate with you. And we're so glad to kind of be part of an extended collaborative team. Thank you so much.
I say this all the time. It's the best project I've worked on in years. I was sorry to see it end. So having opportunities like this to share it are so great, because, you know, we finished creating the resources, I want to say maybe a year ago. So, or over a year ago. So it's just so great to keep it going.
And Charlotte, we may have some news. I mean, we don't want to be too premature, but...
Yeah, hopefully we will get to collaborate with Sandy Goldberg again, because we're developing a season 2. We have a green light from American Masters to focus this time on women of the 20s, with the idea that hopefully it becomes an ongoing franchise and we move forward in time, women of the 30s, the 40s. When we hit the 50s, we can do Catherine Johnson. and we're in our fundraising and development phase right now. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have good news. And it's one of several projects that Sandy Rattley and I are developing right now. There was a question about, you know, what else are you all working on? So in addition to an Unladylike season 2, we're developing a series about public monuments. There was a recent national audit done of about 50,000 public monuments in the US, honoring historical accomplishments, and only 274 of them, which is less than 1%, depict women. So we want to tell that story and focus specifically on the underrepresentation of women in public monumental landscapes, and what certain cities and sculptors are now doing to reverse that disparity. And we're also developing a series on the history of marriage from the point of view of women, where we would focus on several hours, looking from pre-colonial times through today and posing the question about what the future of marriage might look like. So a lot of exciting content heading your way from our production company called Audacious Women.
Yeah. So this has just been an extraordinary evening. We are so grateful to the National Women's Hall of Fame and Tatum and to Jen and to Natalie Rudd, who is behind the scenes making it all happen. She is she's not actually a technology expert, but she has proved tonight that we can all be technology experts. So we just want to say thank you to Natalie for making us all look good and making sure that our mics were on and we could be heard and seen. So before we say goodbye, I'd like to invite everybody in the Hollywood Squares here to say some final words.
Well, I'd like to say, as the senior member of the group, that it's been a pleasure to meet all of you and to participate in this program. And of course, we love talking about Mom because she was humble, but we can tell her story for her. I thank the National Women's Hall of Fame and the people that we've met, and I hope that you have continued success and continue to let the world know about people, about specifically women. And it takes everybody, and taking books off the shelves and out of the schools and out of the stores is not the way to do it. So thank you.
And I can't really improve upon that, but just being mindful of the need and that you all are finding ways to reach young people is it's encouraging, because I retired after 33 years in '03, and things have changed so much and they've lost these last 2 years. So whatever you can do to stir them up again and reconnect them with a better world, I think it'll be good. So thank you, National Women's Hall of Fame. Thank you.
I just want to jump in and say that the research that we've done on Unladylike basically supports and documents the fact that the stories of women and the stories of women of color, Black women in particular, have intentionally actually been erased and have not been saved, not been elevated, and not been told. So that Sandy G, we love the example of encouraging young people to use their access to media, which, I mean, if people can use their phones, they can use almost all of the production devices. I mean, you can't do an Unladylike on a phone, but you can collect the stories from your elders, from the women in your family and your community who are leaders who have made a difference in your life, so that their stories are saved and known. You can do booklets and books to make sure that your family history is preserved and passed on. So we want to encourage everyone out there to tell your own family story, to tell your own heroine stories. It's important to know that women were not just being homemakers and mothers, although those are very important functions in our society. But they were making history, and they were making change, and they were making sure that freedom and justice was really realized for everybody. So bravo to Katherine Johnson and all the women like her who were brave enough to do their best and be excellent regardless of what the circumstances were. Sandy G.
Yeah, I echo everything that you've just said. I also want to encourage everyone to go to the Unladylike2020 website or to PBS Learning Media, watch the other videos. They are amazing, and there is just so much to be learned. I learned so much from working on this project, and I just want to thank Charlotte and Sandy for creating Unladylike and having these great videos. So enjoy, you all, while you watch. And if you see me making funny faces, it's because my dog is sitting here growling at me saying it's time to come out and play with me. So anyway, thank you all for joining us.
Like was really her idea, and she invested her own time and actually her own money to get us started. So sometimes that's what it takes to be that audacious, Charlotte. Thank you.
Never give up. That's one thing all these women have taught us, right? And sometimes it takes generations for change to happen, but you just keep working for justice and equality. Joylette, you were trying to jump in?
I just said, you just don't take no for an answer.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
We have actually been called the women, and people have actually called us the women who don't take no for an
Who
answer.
refuse to take no for an answer.
We'll always find a way. So your mother's channeling that message to us too. Tatum, thank you for stepping in for Jen and being our host for tonight.
Yes, thank you all for being here. It's been an incredible conversation, and seeing the resources that are available to the public is amazing. And I want to thank everyone in the audience who came to join us this evening. All of our resources that we shared with you that were mentioned today will be included in tomorrow's follow-up email. And if you are not sure if you registered for this event, please email admin@womenofthehall.org, and we will include you on our email list so you can have access to all these resources. This project was made possible in part by the Institute of Museum and Library Services and the Museum Association of New York, as well as the support of our many 2021 and 2022 sponsors. Finally, the National Women's Hall of Fame is accepting nominations through the end of this month for the induction class of 2023. We rely on the public for all of our nominations. Us as an institution have no say in who is nominated, so please do nominate a great woman whose contributions stand the test of time and inspire all. Please visit our website at womenofthehall.org for more information, and nominations again are open until March 31st, 2022. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your night.